There's a small town on the banks of the Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania called Towanda. Population 3,000. No one there ever heard of methamphetamine until one day a cooker dealer showed up in town, set up shop, began to make the stuff, distribute it in the community. A mere 5 years later, the police have now identified 500 people who are using or cooking the drug in the county, and they don't know about all of them. The U.S. Attorney says the actual tally is probably significantly worse than that. Now, would you believe that 1 out of 3 people in a small American town, 3,000 population, might be involved in some way with this drug? I mean, it's just shocking. Now, that doesn't mean every small town, but it has happened. When time you get the unknowns tallied into it, it will come to that in this little town. This drug has seduced whole families and turned them into zombies. That's what Randy Epler, the police officer in Towanda, said. He said, "I see walking death." Police tell us that methamphetamines are the #1 drug that they battle today. It's past marijuana, cocaine, and heroin, and is growing by leaps and bounds. It takes people to highs they have never experienced before, and then it destroys them. Physically, mentally, emotionally, morally. It absolutely destroys them. Now, it may be that you don't understand altogether what is happening to people who get involved with this. An example of what's happening is a man named Terry Silvers, and his story is told in the most recent edition of Newsweek magazine. Silvers was 34 years old. He'd worked for 19 years at Shaw Carpet Mill in Dalton, Georgia, dreaming of the day when he could open up his own body shop. He had a wife, 3 children, a 401k, and he'd never missed more than a few days off work his entire life. The only illegal drug he'd tried was marijuana, which he used twice. One day, when he was drinking with his buddies, they talked him into doing some meth to wake him up for the drive home. He said, "I snorted a line, and within 5 seconds, it was like I'd had 12 hours of sleep and wasn't drunk anymore." Soon, he was snorting once or twice a week. Then someone taught him how to smoke it. When the thrill of that wore off, he started injecting, firing, or slamming, as addicts call it. He said, "Golly, it's the best feeling you ever had. It's like your mind is running 100 miles an hour, but your feet aren't moving." His weight dropped so drastically from 180 pounds to 140, his wife thought he had cancer. He grew increasingly hyperactive. He began having seizures and hallucinations. When his wife figured out what the real problem was, she called the carpet mill and tried to get him into its drug treatment program. And think about this one. He decided to quit his job rather than getting help. Fed up, his wife confronted him one Sunday morning in May and told him she was leaving. "He hit me," she said, "and knocked a hole in my eardrum." His daughter Heather called 911 as her father was dragging her mother down the steps of a neighbor's house. When Newsweek finally caught up with him, he was in Whitfield County Jail wearing leg shackles and handcuffs. He said, "I'm not as hardened as all this looks." He says, said a gaunt and embarrassed Silvers, who is charged with manufacturing the drug. "I think meth," his wife is now speaking, "I think meth is one of the plagues the Bible talks about," his wife said. She may be right, but you would have an awfully hard time trying to find it explicitly in the Bible. The reasons for it are probably a lot easier to find in the Bible. Continue to quote, though, from the article. "A growing number of officials around the country want to see more concrete action from the White House. The Drug Czar's office hasn't made any legislative proposals or weighed in on any of those coming from Capitol Hill," somebody's complaining. According to the report in Newsweek, on the Hill last week, the deputy drug czar walked into a buzzsaw as members vented their frustration over his office's level of attention to the problem. Quote, "This isn't the way you tackle narcotics," end quote, said GOP Representative Mark Souter of Indiana. He went on, "How many years do we have to see the same pattern at an increasing rate in the United States until there's something where we have concrete recommendations and not another cotton-picking meeting?" This committee is desperately trying to say, lead. Well, I can imagine a lot of people when they heard that would say, oh yeah, absolutely, give it to them, turn it on. But I thought about it. I said, really? Lead? Lead where? Lead how? What on earth do they expect the drug czar to do? After all, this is a committee meeting in Congress. There's a congressman sitting up there making these statements. The drug czar is not one of the three branches of government. He's over the administrative branch, but he's not in the Constitution even. Congress is one of the three constitutionally designated divisions of government in this country. And they are hollering at somebody else, saying, it's time for some leadership out of you people. Finally, Newsweek cited a convicted, now paroled meth dealer, a man who had a life once upon a time, is now kind of trying to have one again. He said, whatever the government's doing to fight this epidemic, it's failing. He paraphrases a bit of dialogue from the movie Traffic, in which a defiant drug dealer mocks a DEA agent about the futility of the drug war. He said, you think you guys are making a difference? Newsweek's final word, and I quote, they had better make a difference. Hundreds of thousands of lives depend on it. Now, I want you to think carefully about what Newsweek's approach to this is and what they're saying at this point in the article. Hundreds of thousands of lives depend on the government doing something about a drug epidemic. Do you remember Prohibition? Nobody wants to own up to the fact that they remember it, actually, I'm sure. But you know the story. What did the nation learn from Prohibition? When he passed an amendment to the Constitution prohibiting alcohol, and then finally we had to pass another amendment in revoking that one. They learned that when people want to drink, they will find a way. We learned that there would always be criminal elements to help them find that drink if they wanted. We learned also the criminals would get rich, and a lot of people would be killed fighting for turf. That's what we learned from Prohibition before. This is what the government was able to accomplish when it came down to the question of dealing with a drug, and alcohol is a drug. Now, I'm not suggesting that we legalize drugs, although we did with alcohol. What I am suggesting is that it doesn't make a whole lot of difference whatever the government does one way or the other. There are some problems that are really out of their reach. I will tell you, this is probably a truism, that the harder we fight methamphetamines, the more people we will put in jail. So, what happens then? How do we change the outlook in society at all? Suppose, for example, you were out driving on a country road and you became absolutely certain, due to what you had seen, that there was a meth lab right over there. You call up the sheriff's department. Tell them about it. They go out, bust that meth lab, carry those people off, and put them in jail. Fine, we put more people in jail. What effect will that have on the distribution of methamphetamines in your county? None? Why? Well, someone else will move right into their place and start again, because it is cheap, it is easy, it's profitable. And as long as those things exist, it'll go on. I think what we need to understand is where we have gone wrong as a people. Because we have clearly made a wrong turn somewhere back in our history, somewhere back in our society as a people. And I think we need to be asking ourselves, why is this so? Where was that place? The problem is that there's a giant hole in the heart and soul of the American people where God should be. There's a big old hole in the middle of our societies in which God should reside. There is so much in all of our lives, our societies, our communities, our schools, that should revolve around God. And He is not there for them to revolve around. Not because of Him, but because of us. Every substitute we try, from sex to entertainment to drugs, all of it comes up short because we never do solve that aching need that people have got that only God can fill. We are empty. We'll never be able to fill that void ourselves. For how many generations do you suppose now we have been knuckling under people who want to remove God completely from public life? sort of knuckling our forehead or giving, humbling, tugging on the forelock and saying, yeah, well, fine, I understand, let me get out of the way, separation of church and state and all that stuff. Maybe we should just stay out of the way and stay quiet and go back to our churches and our homes and not do anything. They call it separation of church and state. That's a constructive lie. It's a separation between God and public life that they are after. More, the eradication of God from American life is the goal of a substantial number of influential people in this country. And too many Christians are stupidly going along with this under the banner of the separation of church and state. And in case you wonder if I'm talking about you, the answer is probably yes. And to those people who wonder which God I'm talking about, which is one of the things they always love to bring up when you talk about this sort of thing, I am talking about the same God Thomas Jefferson was talking about when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. We do hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not looking right this moment for anything else. I just want to allow the Creator back into the center of our society. Because from every aspect, of the courts to the schools to the universities, every effort is being made to eradicate the Creator from public life. And frankly, folks, the end objective of it all is to eradicate the Creator from private life just like public, and don't ever doubt it for a single minute. Well, this God is also the grantor of every freedom we enjoy, and it is by turning away from Him that we may lose those freedoms indefinitely. The government can go on putting people in prison for drug offenses, and when they run out of prisons, they can build more. They can go on placing the children of these people. By the way, have you ever asked yourself, what happens to the children of a meth mom who's destroyed her life, her health, and everything else? Her teeth are falling out. She's burned herself a couple of times trying to cook this stuff up. And they arrest her and put her in a slammer. Where are her children? Foster homes. They are putting children from these things in foster homes to the point they are having a hard time finding places to put them any longer. What are we going to do when we run out of places to put the children of these families? Will the government have won the war on drugs if we just keep on building prisons and slap these people in the jail? No. No, because that's not really where the war is. The war is a war for the human heart. That is entirely what it's about. And our government long ago abandoned the field in that battle. The secularization of America is all but complete. And when they have finally succeeded in an eradication of Christianity, that's where we'll be. I never really expected the persecution of Christians in this country, but we're headed that way right now, and I don't see anything in the way to slow it down. And what really is bothering me is that Christian people are rolling over for it when they really don't have to, when they could stand up and when they could actually make a difference. Just this week, I got a call from a state congressman. I won't identify him or his state because I don't want to be a name dropper. I chatted with him a while yesterday afternoon. He and a senator from his home state. Now, these are state legislatures, not federal. He and a senator in his own state legislature are gearing up to do something about what he called separation of church and state issues. And he's on the same side that I'm on. His position is that the government has stepped way over the line in this matter. And what caught his attention was my program. In my program was an example in the life of the ministry of the Apostle Paul. And it was just a program. You probably could still hear it on the internet if you missed it on the air. It is still at the moment up on our website. It was the name of the, what was it? The New Bigotry. The New Bigotry is the name of the program. You can still get it there. If it's not there when you get around to it, ask for a tape. We'll be glad to send you one. Because that's the one that caught his attention. And I want to take you to that particular example that he cited because it caused me, him calling me about it, caused me to take another look at it. And I think it's important in the context of what I'm talking to you today. It's in Acts chapter 16. The great Apostle Paul, who's a mentor to all of us, was in Philippi. In chapter 16 of Acts, verse 16, it says, "It came to pass as we went to pray, a certain damsel possessed with a spirit of divination met us, who brought her masters much gain by soothsaying." Now, this is a fact worth bearing in mind. Most politics and most political activities are hard driven by money. The same girl followed us and cried, "These men are the servants of the Most High God. They show us the way of salvation." Now, this is really hard for me to understand, because it was certainly not, judging by Paul's reaction, the Spirit of God that was motivating this girl. And yet she knew precisely who they were. She knew precisely where they were, what they were doing, and wherever they went, she was following them around, and she was calling people and saying, "Oh, these men are the apostles of the Most High God. They're the servants of God. They're showing us the way of salvation." And I rather imagine that there are a lot of wicked spirits who would like to find the way of salvation, if only they could. But the Spirit told the truth. We can only really guess as to why it was that Paul finally got fed up with it and had to do something. He tolerated it for a while. Why he did that, I don't know. And then finally he didn't tolerate it. Why he did that, I don't know. Well, she did this many days, but Paul, verse 18, being grieved, turned and said to the Spirit, "I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." He came out the same hour. Now, when her masters saw that the hope of their gains was gone, because I guess she couldn't do any soothsaying anymore, they caught Paul and Silas, drew them into the marketplace to the rulers. Now, we already told, Luke tells us what their motive was. What was it? Money. Their hope of gains was gone. They brought them to the magistrates and said, "Now these men are Jews. They do exceedingly trouble our city, and they teach customs which are not lawful for us to receive, neither to observe, being Romans." That was a lie from start to finish. It was a lie because that had nothing to do with why they had caught Paul and Barnabas and dragged them in there at all. But since when has it been surprising that people, for political reasons, would lie? It's utter hypocrisy. They had tolerated Paul day after day until he threatened their business interests. So, what do? We sue. We grab them. We drag them into court. We accuse them. Well, the whole crowd rose up against them, and the magistrates tore off their clothes and commanded to beat them. And when they'd gotten through laying a whole bunch of stripes on them, they cast them into prison and charged the jailer to keep them safe. He got his instructions. He put them in the inner prison, made their feet fast in the stocks. Now, a person's reaction at a time like this is often revealing of their character. I mean, this was a total disaster from most people's perspective. From some people's perspective, being out evangelizing, they said, "What did we do wrong? Where was our mistake? Boy, I must have really messed up. Why has God turned on me? Why has God allowed this thing to happen?" That is not Paul's reaction. What happens in times like this is also reveals a lot about how people feel about what it is they're doing. At midnight, Paul and Silas prayed and sang praises to God, and the prisoners heard them. You just have to admire these two men, because they got to be in a lot of pain. They have to be in terrible discomfort sitting there in those stocks. Nobody has nobody's washed their stripes. Nobody's put any ointment on anything. They're just sitting there hurting. And what do? They pray and sing praises to God, and all the prisoners heard what they were doing. Now, here's the question. Where do you bear witness for God? Where you are. This is not rocket science. Where do you bear witness for God? You bear witness to God where you are. Wherever, whatever the risks, whoever you are speaking to, and whatever the occasion. It doesn't make any difference how high they are. It doesn't make any difference how low they are. There can be a whole bunch of jailbirds. You, where you are, if you're there, that's who you speak to. So here sit Paul and Silas in a miserable state, untreated wounds. They pray, sing praises of God in the hearing of everyone within earshot. Suddenly, there was a huge earthquake to the point that the foundation of the prison was shaken. All the doors sprang open. All the locks were open. Everybody's bands, including the shackles, were all loosed. And here these guys sit there, shaken by the earthquake, no doubt, but with everything loose around them and the door open to outside. The keeper of the prison woke out of sleep, saw the doors open. He got out his sword and would have killed himself, supposing that the prisoners had all gotten away and fled. And, of course, he knew what the authorities would do to him if those prisoners had gotten away. It didn't matter whether it's his fault or not. He would be treated very sorely. badly enough that he was ready to kill himself instead of face it. But Paul cried with a loud voice, "Don't do yourself any harm. We're all here." So the jailer called for a light, sprang in, and came trembling and fell down before Paul and Silas, and he brought them out and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" Even that expression suggests that the man knew a great deal about what had been said, what had been done, about why it was done, and why Paul and Silas were there and what they were saying. They said, "Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and you shall be saved, and your whole house." And they spoke to him the word of the Lord, to all that were in his house. And he took them the same hour of the night. He washed their stripes, and he was baptized, and all his folks immediately. When he brought them into his house, he set food before them and rejoiced, believing in God with all his house. My point is, you just never know when real evangelism will happen. And I use the term "will happen" because in an awful lot of cases, it really does just happen. It isn't necessarily your plan. It isn't that you work the whole thing out and you have worked out a plan, a system, an approach, and you go out to evangelize and stand on the street corner and preach, or go house to house and preach, or whatever it is you do. That's fine. But you never know when a totally off-the-wall piece of evangelism will happen. And then followed the event that caught the good congressman's attention. When it was day, the magistrate sent the sergeant saying, "Let these people go." So the keeper of the prisoner was happy about that. Came in, told Paul, "The magistrates have sent to let you go, so depart and go in peace." He was glad to let them go. But Paul, interestingly enough, wasn't buying it. He said, "No. They have beaten us openly, publicly, in front of the whole town, uncondemned, which means we did not go to court. Nobody heard any witnesses. No defense was able to be offered. They have beaten us openly, uncondemned, being Romans, and have cast us into prison. And now they're going to try to cover it up. Now they want us to go away. They want us to just hit the city's limits and just keep on traveling and not have to deal with it anymore? No. Truly, let them come down here themselves and fetch us out." I just love this. This is our boy. This is Paul. And he didn't roll over for anyone. The authorities in Philippi had acted unlawfully. And Paul had no intention whatever of allowing them to get away with it. So the sergeants told these words to the magistrates, probably trembling a little bit while they told them. And they were frightened when they heard that they were Romans, because nobody had even bothered to ask the question about whether they were or not. Because, you see, Romans had rights. Other people didn't have any rights. It's true. If you weren't a Roman citizen, you had no rights. Whatever they wanted to do to you, just about they could do. But if you're a Roman citizen, they couldn't. They were afraid of that, and they came and besought them and brought them out and desired them, pleaded with them, "Please leave our town." But Paul didn't run for the city limits. They went out of prison, entered into the house of Lydia, and when they had seen the brethren and comforted them, notice, they comforted the brethren. Then they departed in their own time, in their own way. Now, there is something very important that has happened over recent years. The First Amendment to the Constitution has been bent completely out of shape by the courts. And what I'm about to say is probably going to surprise a lot of people. It is not altogether the fault of the courts. Well, whose fault could it be, you might ask? Well, there's an interesting article not long ago in the journal First Things that advanced the argument that the courts have come to see themselves as conciliators. And I forget the author's name. I'll have to go look that article up again because I do want it in hand, but I read it with great interest. What the author was about, and he had a number of illustrations of his point, which were very persuasive, is that the court see themselves as conciliators of society's problems. They want to make peace. And by the way, a synonym for conciliator is appeaser. To conciliate is to appease. Now think about that for a moment. Whenever a court case arises, who is it that you would tend to think, if you're going to appease anyone, you would try to appease? The plaintiff. The complainer, right? The defendant over here, he was happy enough until the case came up and somebody tried to sue him over something. The guy you've got to make happy is the guy who is doing the complaining. So, the Supreme Court and other courts have a Solomonic decision in front of them, and they make decisions based not on a strict reading of the Constitution, but in an effort to conciliate the litigators in front of the bench. One definition, as I said, is to appease. Why then has the court drifted so far to the left, even when conservative justices have been appointed? Are you up with me yet? Are you getting maybe a little bit ahead of me? Because one of the big complaints that people have made is that Souter, Kennedy, and Sandra Day O'Connor were appointed by conservative presidents, and they end up voting on the left side of the court all the time. How does it happen? The answer? Because the lawsuits coming up there are nearly all coming from the left. So it is the left that have to be appeased. If we're going to solve problems, we're going to be peacemakers, if we're going to try to make things work better in society, and we want everyone to calm down, we feel like we have got to address the people who have come to us with a grievance. Good Christian people keep turning the other cheek, and we're beginning to get to the place where we may not have any cheeks left to turn. We've been on the defensive for a long time now. But consider a reading here of the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's what's going on, at the Supreme Court. We're petitioning the government for a redress of grievances. Our government has severely inhibited, and in some cases almost all but prohibited, the free exercise of religion, which is prohibited right here in the First Amendment. The fact is, the courts notwithstanding, Congress has done little or nothing to protect the free exercise of religion in the face of steady encroachment. If we're going to sit around complaining about what Congress hasn't done, we can worry about the meth epidemic later. How about we start out with the fact that they're not protecting religious freedom in this country? That there is no God in the center of our society. There is no God who is the organizing principle and organizing moral principle that the whole society can turn to for guidance and for a reason for living. But the Congress has allowed this to be driven away. Did you notice, by the way, that last item in there? Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. People in this country have allowed themselves to become a doormat under the feet of people who are determined not merely to inhibit our free speech, but the freedom to practice our faith and to teach it to our children. Watch for that last part. The freedom to teach our faith to our children. Because that is not very far beyond the cusp of the battle that's currently being waged in the courts in this country. The Baptist churches, and they have made a number of efforts to try to get their kids out of the public schools. I say the churches know. An organization in the Baptist Convention, Southern Baptist Convention, called Get the Kids Out. That's the name of the organization. They have a website, getthekidsout.org. They wanted a resolution this year from the Southern Baptist Convention calling for the establishment of parochial schools by the Baptists and the withdrawal of their children from public schools for homeschooling, even if necessary, or into parochial schools if not. In other words, let's get them out of the public schools wholesale. Now, never mind that the Catholics came to this conclusion long ago and made that decision to pull their kids out of the public school and establish parochial schools everywhere. Never mind the fact that the Baptist church is every bit as big, every bit as strong, every bit as financially able, every bit as talented in terms of resources they've got to do precisely the same thing and probably do it better than the Catholics are doing it. So what's the difference? The difference is that every Baptist church is completely autonomous. They are Congregationalists. They are not accountable to anybody outside of their organization. So they go to a conference like the Southern Baptist Convention. They pass a resolution. The people who come there take the resolution home to their home church, and the church either will do it or won't do it. But nothing much has happened. They passed a resolution a year ago. They passed another resolution this year. What they did was reach a compromise that they call a good resolution. I personally think they basically settled for what they thought they could get out of the convention, not because they thought it was good. But I can tell them it will accomplish nothing. It won't hold. The pity is that if they began as an entire denomination, Baptist, one end of the country to the other, to get their kids out of the school, they would do an enormous amount to force a reevaluation of all kinds of stuff in the public schools in the way these things are going in the country. But too many Baptists are school teachers and members of the teachers' unions for now. I do not know how long they are going to stay that way. I read the resolution. You can find it on the website, getthekidsout.org. They have it down the page somewhere there, and where they actually have the resolution that was passed this year. And while it has a lot of good things to say, it never really calls for or insists upon any kind of firm action. What the Baptist churches are going to try to do is try to change the direction of the public schools, and they will be crucified by the press every time they open their mouth. And then they'll have to go back and talk it over one more time. And they may have to come to the resolution that getthekidsout.org is suggesting, and that is pull the kids out of the public school entirely. We'll see what happens there. Now, why am I telling you all this? After all, you're just a small church in a small city. What can you do? I have no idea. The reason I have no idea is because I have no idea what jail you may be in. Excuse me. I have no idea what meeting you may be in. I don't think any of you will be in jail. I have no idea what PTA meetings you will attend. I have no idea what teachers you will sit down and talk to. I have no idea where the Spirit of God may take you, before whom you will appear, in whose presence you will have a chance to speak. So I'm telling you this because I don't know who God will use. What I'm telling it to you for is in the hope that I can give you some backbone that an awful lot of Christians these days don't have. And they don't have it because they have made certain assumptions relative to the Bible, turning the other cheek, and so forth, that are ill-founded when it comes to living in a country like the United States, where if you want to go, I was walking along one day to wonder where the government was, and I turned to my left, and there it was. It was a mirror. That's who the government is. It's me. I'm as much a part of the government as you are. In fact, I'm really technically just as much a part of the government as my senator is, because I voted to send him or her up there, as the case may be. Now, I'm telling you this because I think we need to get our heads out of the sand and pretending that we have no responsibility for the direction in which our community is heading. This is no time for Christian people to playing a game of Ain't It Awful? Read Eric Burns' games people play, because that, frankly, is what a lot of us play all the time. Ain't it awful? Christian people of every stripe need to take Paul as their mentor and stand up for their rights and even go to court if necessary. I think it's about time the Supreme Court tried to appease some Christians for a change. Christian people need to hold their congressmen's feet to the fire, not as a voting bloc. I don't want to start some new moral majority or anything like that. Because neither party, candidly, really cares for our welfare beyond what it takes to get elected, so there's no place to go there. If we form political action groups, we can all be put into a little box, ribbon tied on us and put us on a shelf, and promptly ignored forevermore. What I'm trying to say is listen to the leading of the Holy Spirit in your life. Ask yourself every day, where is God taking me? Be there. Wherever it is God is taking you, standing tall. It could even cost you your life. But if it does, make it count. Jesus said, you shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them and the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, don't worry about what you're going to speak. It shall be given you in the same hour what you shall speak. For it is not you that speak, but the Spirit of your Father that speaks in you. But if you just roll over, that statement that could have been made never will be.